Hello, everybody, and you're very welcome to our first of our parallel sessions. Today, I'd like to introduce Mark Brown from Dublin City University, who will be introducing his first session, and we've got 20 minutes. So, Mark, if you'd like to take it away.
Well, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Nice to get things underway after the introduction this morning. This is a joint paper with Mairead and Eamon, but for simplicity reasons, I'll present on their behalf. You can see that I've customized my badge, and those of you who want to figure out what ACO means, A-K-O, then I suggest you do a Google search, but it has a little bit of a link to the Māori language in New Zealand, my country of birth. We have an interesting title, and it's borrowed from Dr. Seuss. Of course, Dr. Seuss is a little controversial at the moment, so we were very pleased to note that the book that we've borrowed this title as a metaphor is not one of the ones that was identified as containing racist images, but it might be something we have to be mindful of in the future. And it also tells us that we have to also be very careful about the kind of metaphors we choose and the language we choose. Because what today might be seen acceptable in times in the future may well not. The particular book and the metaphor we've borrowed here is about how reading, how knowledge, if you like, opens the world and takes you places. In this context, though, we're really referring to sort of open scholarship. And we want to share with you a study we've been doing for the last 5 years. But just to put a little bit more context on the title, the particular page from the text that is our inspiration is, I'll read it to you. I can read in red, I can read in blue, I can read in pickle color too. And then the next page says, you'll learn about Jake the pillow snake and all about Foo-Foo the Snoo. So what we want to do is try to demystify a little bit about Foo-Foo the Snoo in the time available. I don't have the chat box in front of me now, so we'll pick any feedback up at the end. But I have a little task, second task. You've already hopefully done a Google search on ACO. What's your number one go-to source for professional reading to keep you up to date? Share that resource with each other in the chat box as I keep talking here. What I want to, though, begin with is by establishing that open access publications in the field, shall we say, of educational technology. I'll use that as a catch-all for e-learning, open education, technology-enhanced learning, and so forth, has a, well, I guess you could say we're just drowning in the number of open access publications. This particular journal article, which analysed them, identified 270. It's a few years old now, and just last week I added 2 more new journals to this list that we keep on our website if you haven't come across previously. Of course, there's lots of different websites with these listings. What we don't do on this website is try to identify the ones we think might be more useful for particularly doctoral students. So we're drowning in openness in many respects, and all of us need to develop filtering strategies, because there's just no possible way you could read all that literature, let alone even just glance through the index or contents pages of the journals. But at the same time, it's essential that we do have a scholarly culture of academic reading, and that's part of how we build community and share knowledge and disseminate new information, new ideas and insights. So for that reason, way back in 2016, the team we have in the National Institute here in Dublin at DCU, just pause for a minute because I should have put in the embedded sponsorship piece there, but I'll keep going since I've now done it anyway. In 2016, we launched an activity where we said to ourselves, so what would be the top 10 journal articles that we've read, open access articles for the year? Truthfully, at the time, I was a little concerned that we didn't have enough reading going on amongst our team. We were experimenting with having reading groups and having a hot topic monthly sort of talk. But I'm not sure that people were aware of actually the literature they should be reading. So we went through this exercise, identified 10 articles, posted them on our blog with a little bit of explanation. And then the following year, we wanted to continue this, but it raised a number of questions about the criteria, the methodology, who we actually involved. And we've written about this on our blogs, and the criteria are published, and we've continued to do this in quite an inclusive way amongst our team, with an internal strategy of trying to get more people engaged in the literature, and an external strategy of hopefully making a contribution to the community by the hundreds of articles that we go through to identify what we call our top 10. We're not going to say that these are the 10 best articles. They're the 10 that we've selected that we think are, in inverted commas, good reads. I don't know if you've seen last year's. We published it in early January. If not, I invite you to take a look. And I'm just going to quickly go over a few of the publications from what we identified last year. Actually, what we did was we had two lists of top 10 because there were so many articles coming out focused on COVID-19 or the COVID pandemic that we didn't want to skew our regular top 10 list from those publications. Of course, even in the first 3 months of this year, there have been many more publications. So we had two dedicated lists. On the website, what we've done on our blog, we've curated why we've chosen them, but just some quick facts. And because we've done this for 5 years, we have a nice set of aggregated data that we'll be working with in a future publication forthcoming. But in this year's list of top 10 good reads, there are 28 authors. More women than men. That's been a trend, actually. Originally, there were more men than women. Of course, you have to take these things with a grain of salt, given the small sample, albeit that we looked at a larger population of articles of around about 250 that went into the selection of the top 10. A little US-centered this year, only 3 from Europe. Only 2 single-authored publications, and that's been a very common trend that most of the articles we select are jointly authored. This is the very first year that the Australasian Journal of Educational Technology, and not due to my down under roots, but it's the first year it hasn't taken the #1 place. So for 4 years running, it had the top journal that we rated. And this year, there were 4 new journals fresh to the list, although our methodology and criteria does place a focus on finding fresh and new content. So here's what we chose as our #1 article. For those of you who have more of a research focus, or for those with a practitioner focus, we chose this. You can see the little bit of the curation that comes from our blog because of the call for research that actually matters, that research actually that has a practical application rather than just theoretical research. And I think that resonates with many people, that the praxis focus still. Our #2 and 3 articles, similarly coming out of US-based journals, a review of 10 years of research through co-citation. In part, we selected that article because of the very innovative methodology in its literature review. Current trends and missing links, our criteria is always looking for things that are missing. Things that you might not come across, because we see that as our contribution. 2 more just to share with you very briefly. The first one, our #4, was very interesting because, again, in many respects, we selected this because it taught us a lesson. It looked in an innovative way at low or uncited publications. We tend, when we do literature reviews, to look for all the highly cited publications. This looked for the things that hadn't come out of the shadows. So a very interesting analysis, and again, in the spirit of saying, let's find where the new and fresh ideas are. Perhaps the last comment before I move on is, in this slide, we wanted to emphasize, again, consistent with looking for fresh ideas. Here's a UK-based journal and a new journal contrasted with our #8, which is the International Journal for Educational Technology and Higher Education. If you're not familiar with that journal, that is now the #1 ranked open access journal in the field based on Scopus rankings. It's actually now the #27 journal ranked in all education publications. We're quite proud that we sponsor the journal and co-edit that journal. But the reason I've got it there, only 1 publication showed up from that journal compared to the other ones that we've shown you. So we were not privileged, if you like, with the mainstream. A takeaway message, just eyeing the time with about 5 minutes to go, so I think I'm all right on time, is that despite our strong focus here on open access publications and disseminating those publications as widely as we can, it is a commentary that much of the literature that we might want to be reading is still restricted or behind closed firewalls, subscription models that many developing countries would perhaps not have access to. And this is just one example. And then another aspect to it is, despite what I said about the journal that we support, most of these open access journals are not rated from a Scopus point of view and an academic promotion point of view. So there's a real tension here between the open and the restricted. Apart from the fact, another takeaway message is we're seeing a blurring of the boundaries. Some clever scholars are beginning to make available their pre-publication journal articles as open access before they go behind the firewall. So I think there's a lesson there for you, because ultimately, why do all this work if no one reads it? And the truth is that many of these restricted publications actually get very little readership. Very briefly, to kind of come towards the end, probably talk too fast. I just wanted to share some of the COVID articles that we selected. We didn't put these into a rank order from 1 to 10, and I can tell you that rank order causes us no end of angst amongst our team and debate, but that's actually also the good part of why we have this exercise. We just didn't think it would be appropriate to rank them. But to share you our top article, and you might want to, I invite you to read the reason why we ranked this number 1, partly because it came out on the 27th of March, very early in the pandemic, and gave very good advice from a learning design perspective on how we move perhaps beyond emergency remote teaching to online learning. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this publication. It's been widely cited. At the same time, tongue-in-cheek in the curation in our blog for this, what I'm cited as saying is, I just wonder if we flipped things around. I'm a little bit weary of all these top 10 checklists. Actually, there are dozens of them. We have a website that lists them. All these top 10 checklists, if all of a sudden we were the norm teaching online and we had to move in a crisis to suddenly having to teach face-to-face, I wonder how comfortable we would be with turning face-to-face teaching into a handy checklist of 10 items, given how challenging and idiosyncratic and so forth it is. So the message for me there, in a critical sense, is good teaching can't be reduced to a handy checklist of hints. It's a socio-cognitive process. A couple of the articles we selected, one you might be familiar with because it was done quite early, and it's a case study, I think about 30 different country case studies. There's a small piece on Ireland that I contributed to there. And on the other side of it, we wanted to single out what we considered to be one of the most interesting and thought-provoking, provocative journals, post-digital science and education, which I hope you're following, because there's some excellent publications coming through in that relatively new journal. So returning with a couple of minutes to spare to the metaphor of Foo-Foo the Snoo. This exercise, as I've indicated to you, we've done for 5 years. We've done it initially because we wanted to get some conversations internally in our team. But over the 5 years, we've had a lot of feedback on our top 10s. It's actually the single most popular blog based on analytics every single year. But my question for you in the chat is to post, if you like, a link to what was your top read from 2020. It's a pretty difficult question to answer. It's actually often a question I ask when I'm interviewing candidates for a job. What is it that you use to filter your analysis, your reading of the literature? Is it the name of the journal? Is it the author of the publication? In my case, I frequently will scan through the references to just see if there's anything I haven't seen. But the trap is that if you stick with what you know in terms of the mainstream publications, including Alt's journal, then maybe you'll miss a real gem that's published somewhere. Of course, this whole exercise is biased towards English-speaking publications, which is something we acknowledge. And then what tip would you provide, particularly for new and emerging scholars, scholar practitioners, PhD students, to help them engage with the literature without getting drowned And that's, I guess, an ongoing conversation in many respects, but it's certainly one that we want to support our colleagues and then in a wider sense, our community. So wrapping up on the places you'll go, well, we really want people to be reading more, to be writing more, of course, of telling their stories. And I shouldn't ignore the fact that there's a lot of grey literature in addition to the journals that I've shared here as open access publications, and perhaps that's what you've identified as your very best reading source. So hopefully that's of interest, and if you haven't seen the blog, I'll post a link in the chat box now. I can get back into the platform environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Loads to think about there. I love this resource. It's really, really useful. And I think I'll just let Mark catch up on the chat there, if you can see it in the text window. So we've got a couple of questions coming in already. I think the first one was from Teresa. Was that around, does looking for new ideas include those published in languages other than English? And I think you've answered that, but do you want to take that, Mark?
Yes, indeed, and I mentioned that, and we acknowledge that as a bias. Our criteria, which I didn't take time to show you the criteria, what we tried to do is one of the criterion is around inclusivity, and so we're looking for publications from developing world, from journals that we may not, or in the service that we're trying to offer here, journals that you may not have come across previously. So particularly one of the journals we chose in this year, people probably may not see it as a top read, but it had Terry Anderson. Everyone knows Terry Anderson, but it had a doctoral student from Spain, and it was published in a Spanish publication, albeit in an English open access Spanish publication. So that was one of the reasons we chose that publication.
Great, thanks. We've got a question from Tom Farrelly as well. Are they listed on the DOAJ, even if not on Scopus?
Well, of course, what we have to do is be careful we don't play the academic game here. Now, I say that because I say it tongue-in-cheek. Those of you who are in academic roles, there are constraints that you face. These are the sort of barriers that we need to push through. Actually, I think these are the things we need to challenge as sacred cows post-COVID, because the irony is, someone like in my own role, without being too egotistical about this, when you're at a professor level, you tend to be allowed to play by different rules. But I have colleagues and staff who are working their way through academic promotion where Scopus ranked publications seem to matter. I couldn't give a damn in many respects about Scopus ranked publications. I'm more interested in the impact. And that doesn't mean the impact score. That's about who reads it, how they use the reading. So there are lots of different metrics we can use. I guess if you are caught in that bind between restricted publication and promotion guidelines, you have to have a foot in both camps. You can't ignore some of the traditional metrics.
Great, thanks. Yeah, lots there around promotions around learning and teaching and how we measure impact. My question, Mark, would be around what do you have any reading groups? Is there any ways that you bring together your staff to kind of discuss and debate some of the reading that you're pointing them towards? Yeah,
it's a good question. We've experimented over the years with a number of things. Just 2 weeks ago, I think it would be, I've probably got some colleagues here keeping me honest, we reintroduced a reading group, more focused on sort of mainstream teaching enhancement. It's one of those paradoxes, the time that it takes to do that and get people to read the article and engage with it when we are all busy. But we all agreed when we did this 2 weeks ago, wow, that was great. We saw so many different things in the article compared to if we just read it ourselves. But the truth is we don't do enough of that. And I would still be concerned. My colleagues know that I'm an avid reader. I'm constantly sharing publications with my team. But at the same time, I'm very conscious that actually can be very overwhelming for them. And maybe less is more here. And I would be very happy if everyone on our team read the top 10 and the top 10 COVID. And I couldn't put my hand in my heart and say that everyone's done that, to be truthful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I really liked your point towards the end there about the problem with top 10 lists. And I think there's a danger in when we're introducing colleagues who may not be familiar with this literature or indeed educational literature in general, never mind education technology stuff, that they don't kind of, they're accessing it through the top 10 lists and not actually understanding there's a wealth and a history of literature behind the practices and the research that have been going on. So I think that this is a really good way to introduce people to the richness that is there. We're just at 20 minutes past, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap that up short and sharp. Thank you very much, Mark, for keeping it to time. We can move over to Discord if anybody's got any further questions for Mark. But other than just that, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Mark. Thanks to all the people in the chat, and we'll sign off from this session. Thank you.
Nom nom nom.